Science fair is a definite passion of mine and something I've been involved with since, since elementary school as a participant. I'm very excited to talk to you this year about how to speak to a judge, albeit this is a year when you really won't be speaking to me or any of the other judges directly. So let's get into it a little bit. Science is storytelling, and I'm going to demonstrate that for you with a little example. This is an example of something that I'll often start a scientific presentation with, because wouldn't it be amazing if every time someone was injured and lost some tissue, that tissue could be replaced magically or with science. One of the areas of my research is isolating specific cell types that we can then differentiate into body tissues, nerves, skin, muscle, bone, and so forth. When I want to describe a particular experiment, I use a story, I use an example, and I start with a claim, I will more effectively captivate my audience, and hopefully over time, whether that's 4 minutes or 8 minutes of a presentation, I and anyone else can share their passion about the topic that they really wanted to present on. So science is storytelling. Let's talk about that a little more. So of course, in the past, this was a one-on-one conversation that a science fair presenter, you as students, would have with judges in person in a big giant room like this with poster boards. But Michelle's already told us this year is different. The coronavirus has not just circled us here in Southern California, but the entire world, and our science fair, as well as almost everyone else's in the world, is going virtual this year. Michelle Serrano went through the items to be judged with you, and my real focus today is going to be to cover the video presentation part of what you will present and how you will present that to the judges. So the video presentation is your chance to talk about your project. It certainly has to contain your science, your development, your engineering. It needs to be clear. It needs to be organized. It also needs to be captivating, and you also need to share your passion while you're doing it. There are time limits, and Michelle already shared these with you for the different divisions. By way of review, of course, the elementary division, grades 4 and 5, will have 3 to 5 minutes. The juniors will have 4 to 6 minutes, and the seniors will have 5 to 8 minutes. But during those 3 to 8 minutes, depending on which section you're in, let's make sure that you captivate your judge's attention. So I'm going to go through a total of 4 slides right now, which are going to be the components of what you will share in your video presentation. This slide are the true essentials. So there's 4 bulleted points here, and I'll read them to you even though they're on the slide, because I really want you to hear these. So the first, and this is essential for everyone's project, is where'd you get the idea for this project? And the answer to that can be a story that you tell about a personal experience, something that you saw in your family, something you experienced at school. It can be something you saw on TV. There are all sorts of reasons why we get ideas for projects, and you want to share that and share it very clearly, really probably as the starting point for your video presentation. The second very important component, which really will help you convince me as a judge that you care about what you did, is telling me what interests you most about the subject that you chose. Again, that can be from a personal experience or where you're headed with your life and your education and your potential career. The third one isn't always relevant to most projects, but why is your project important in society as a whole? How is it going to help people? This generally applies very well in, and is fairly obvious in engineering projects. It can often be obvious in life science projects. In the physical sciences, it is something useful. If you're doing real science, there's someone that will benefit from it. You may have to think a little bit more about how you translate that to society as a whole. And then the fourth important component is what were your results and conclusions? So these 4 bulleted items should constitute between 3 and 4 minutes of your presentation. So if you are an elementary student and you only have 3 to 5 minutes, this is pretty much it. And you want to cover all of these topics. For the juniors and seniors who have a little more time, let's talk a little bit about some of the additional areas and topics that you can cover. So there are 3 slides of this. There's a total of 12 items that I've included as other components. And as I look at these, not all will apply to every type of project. Not all apply to, for example, physical sciences. Not all apply to engineering. But from each of these next 3 slides, you're probably going to want to pick 1 or 2 items that are part of your project. So special skills or equipment that you had to learn to use, that's a good one. You know, what is special? What is unique about your project? You may have already covered that in one of the first 4, but if you didn't, you can add it here. Talking about the goal is, of course, a little bit distinct from your hypothesis, though you will want to talk about how you formed your hypothesis, and potentially the goal can roll into that. And it may really be part of the first item here, which is where did you get the idea for your project? So a lot of these are, of course, potentially a duplication of earlier topics, but your time is very limited in what you get to make in your video presentation, and you'll want to pick from this list carefully. The next list of 4, and I'm sorry, what I meant to say, even on this slide here with this first list of 4, is really 30 to 45 seconds is a lot to spend on any one of these topics. They should mostly be a 15 to 20 second conversation. So if you're at 3 to 4 minutes from the core components, you have a maximum of 8 minutes as a senior, you're only going to be able to pick 4 or 5 of these total. So part 2 of the additional 12, sources of error. This is very important in projects where you've performed an experiment where there is a single variable, and especially in projects where there are multiple variables. You're definitely going to want to comment on sources of error. One of the most common judging questions, which I won't get to ask you, so you better give me the answer in your video, is what would you do if you could do this differently, if you were to start this over again? That's a big one. And then, is there a practical application? We've kind of covered that in the core, but you may have a very specific thing. And then item 4 is problems that you developed while you were developing this experiment, challenges you faced, and how you overcame them. That's another really common judging question that lets me as a judge hear from you that this science wasn't all easy for you, and that as you started on process A, you met challenge B and you overcame it by changing your experiment or bringing in a new tool or new device. And then the final list of components for your video presentation are things that you may or may not take advantage of. When I see these topics, I think mostly about senior level projects, and they are, again, 20 to 30 second comments. What did you find that was already known about your project? Don't waste a lot of time on that one. While that's something that we'll often query students about in a one-on-one judging, I don't know that it fits well in a video. Resources, that you accessed, that you acquired to set up your project. Similarly, that's a little hard to build into your video presentation. But the next one's important: questions that were created as a result of your work. In other words, what are you going to do next? Where does this science lead to? And then interesting things that you learn from doing the project is often a nice way to finish or summarize your video. So those are the broad topics that I think you should include. I have not been monitoring the chat. I know several have come in. Are there questions at this point, or should I keep going?
I think you're good to go.
Okay, good, great. So let's talk about the 500-pound gorilla in the room, which is glossophobia. Glossophobia is the fear of public speaking, and it is rampant in America, and in fact happens to be the #1 fear reported by Americans year after year after year. And it's worse than the fear of insects and snakes, which of course is #2 or #3 on the list every year too. So let's talk about why it's important for you to speak, and how to learn how to speak, and how you're going to overcome glossophobia if you have it. Because science fair, this virtual environment, and you being able to give a video presentation is a great first step in moving past glossophobia if you have it. So why do you need to speak? All sorts of reasons. In the realm of science, anything that is in the published literature that appears in journals, and certainly stuff that appears in textbooks, is old news. It's at least 1 to 2 years to get your science into a publication. So speaking, like we're doing right now at a conference, is the way to get the newest news out there. Your future job also depends on your ability to talk, to speak well, to speak to your employer, your boss. But as a student, you're evaluated by everyone around you, especially your faculty, by the way you speak. Your conversations and your talking will reflect on your advisors' thoughts about you, and what they're going to write about you in letters of reference, or who they're going to call about you. And a very interesting phenomenon that I certainly know is true from both sides of the table is that anybody interviewing you for a job will make most of their conclusions about you in the first 3 minutes that you're talking. So there's no doubt that the ability to speak is critical, and learning how to do it is critical too. So how do you get over glossophobia? It's something that you can actually learn very quickly. And I'll tell you that the ultimate way to get over it is by simply being prepared. The one thing every person needs to realize, especially in the setting of science fair and making your video presentation, is that you put the work in, you prepared, and believe it or not, you know more about that topic than almost anyone in the world, and potentially everyone in the world that you're talking to. So #1 way, preparation. For the purposes of making your video presentation for science fair, know your audience. Your audience are going to be scientists and engineers. That's who you are talking to. Know the length of your talk. We've already covered that. And know the style of your presentation. And that's really more related to your style than it is science, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. Preparing the talk itself is something that I think Michelle covered pretty well in the first presentation, but and I'll go through that a little bit in a moment as well, in terms of organizing your content and preparing your slide. So the style of your talk is often something that people describe as being broken into potentially into four quadrants or 4 different areas. But the fact is, though science is often considered to be informative, it really has to be all of these things. It has to be persuasive. It often is instructional. Hopefully there's some elements of informality as well to help with the communication of dry facts like I'm giving you right now. So yes, the style of your talk for the video presentation should be informative, but bring in elements that make it persuasive and instructional as well. The next way to prepare and get over any sort of fear of presenting is choosing and organizing your content. So know as you sit down to script your video presentation, and you should definitely script your video presentation, is know what you're trying to tell the audience. And that's what those 4 slides I showed earlier were all about. The 4 core messages and then the 12 additional messages from which you'll pull some key choices. Then write out your element and keep it simple. You have a very limited amount of time. You cannot drone on. You really will only have whatever that allotted time that is assigned to you. This is a sample digital display board. I know Michelle covered this in some detail, and these display board examples will be available on the RCOE website or in the handbook, the digital handbook. So you can think through how it will apply to you, whether it is a scientific project or an engineering project. But I want you to think for a moment about 60-year-old science of learning from Edgar Dale, which was the cone of learning concept that we still believe is true today, even in this realm of digital transmission of data. And that is that 2 weeks after exposure to something, we remember 10% of what we read, 20% of what we hear, 30% of what we see, but 50% of what we see and hear. So the opportunity you have as students giving this video presentation is to show me your data and then tell me your data at the same time. So have it on your slide and then tell me those key points. Graphics do add to retention. As far as design elements go, don't have super long lists like I have on this slide right here. And if you do, highlight something so it jumps out at you as the viewer. Do keep in mind light backgrounds are much easier for people to read off of. And there's a lot of colorblind people out there as well. So don't use a whole bunch of colors like Edgar Dale did in this cone of learning slide of his. The principles of an effective talk are very straightforward. You need to communicate, and that is in terms of your claim and the evidence that you have around it. You need to persuade your audience that what you say is true, and that comes from level setting yourself as an expert, and you can only demonstrate that by understanding the background of your problem and talking about the experiment you did with a lot of confidence and detail. Be interesting, and that really comes from being enthusiastic about your subject. You have to grab and hold your audience's attention. I probably should have kept showing you ripped up arms and faces if I really wanted to hold your attention for this whole talk. And manage your time really well. You must practice to do that, and that's really the key element. So practice, practice, practice your talk. You can record it multiple times, play it back for yourself, play it back for your parents, play it back for your teacher, play it back for your friends, bore them to death with it, so you make it better and better and better. Again, those 4 slides that I have with the key components, here are your 4 essential components. This is 3 to 4 minutes, 20 to 30 seconds on each of, or on 3 or 4 of these, and that is how you are going to prepare your video presentation. So in conclusion, preparation is crucial. Your graphics will enhance retention according to Edgar Dale. Finish on time, which I'm trying to do right now. And the more you practice, the better you will do. And that is all I have for you from a presentation, and I'm happy to answer questions that you have.
Dr. Gupta, we have 2 comments.
Yes.
Elevator speech, convince someone or self to someone in time, in the time you have together in the elevator. Another great tip is the tone of your voice is very important. Show that you are excited about your project, be sincere. Excellent presentation, excellent slides.
Oh, well, good. Thanks. Those are great. Those are great thoughts. You know, the elevator concept is always so important. You know, you get into that elevator on the 20th floor and you've got just until you hit the lobby level to tell someone about your idea. And, you know, that's generally accounted to be for 90 seconds. And it's a super important concept in science because that's about all you have when you first meet someone. In the context of the video presentation, you don't get that end of 90 seconds. Hey, wow, that's a cool idea. Unfortunately, you just got to keep going in this one to get your 3 to 8 minutes of speaking. But yeah, everyone who does a science project ought to have the elevator pitch version of it. That's a great comment.
We have a question. So the 8 minutes we have to speak, we have to answer all the questions from the first few slides and still speak of our project?
So I don't mean to turn those lists of the 4 slides that I showed into a recipe. The first slide with the 4 bullet points on it is really the slide, and I'll pull it back up here. That is the slide that you know you really should cover. And this by itself will actually cover some of those topics, but it is very difficult without you pointing to a part on your science fair board to say, let me take you through my methods. And you won't really have that interaction of pointing to the various devices that you may have used. So yes, I do think this overview of components is really what you get to talk about. It's you know, in an engineering project, it's all about the methods and the design phase. In the physical sciences and life sciences, sometimes it is about the materials and methods as well, but that's going to be a lot harder to convey. You're going to want to focus on your hypothesis, the setup of the experiment, relatively briefly touching on methods, and then presenting your results and your discussion. So yes, the 8 minutes is the limit. That much is for sure, or less than 8 minutes if you're a junior or an elementary student.
And we have another question. Would it be okay if students have flashcards, or should this be memorized?
Well, this is a video presentation that you're going to be recording on your own device. So I think you can do it any way you want. You'll certainly be a lot more convincing to me if you are staring right into the camera and giving me your video presentation. And I'm not sure that I'll have access as a judge to anything more than audio for that either, but I'll defer to the folks from the RCOE about that. But yeah, I mean, obviously you can read a script, but the more you practice that script, the less rehearsed you will sound, the more competent you will sound.